All right, we are recording, and it's chapter 10, and yeah, I got criticism. All right, so the end of the last chapter, we have the sandstorm starting that drives the group on Tatooine. That's actually on Tatooine, not on the ship. Into the Anakin leads them into his home with his mother. So we get the conversations and such there for through to the end of that night, essentially. We also Qui-Gon communicates a little bit with Obi-Wan, confirming with Obi-Wan that yes, you were right to tell them not to send transmission, not to reply to the transmission they got from Naboo. And then we also have Palpatine on Coruscant, and it's actually kind of unclear something in there. Let me actually go back and look at it. Because it describes Palpatine being there, Sidious being there watching, then mentions... I think it's earlier than that. Oh, no, it's not. It should be later. But then it mentions a hologram, like as though Maul is communicating with him over a hologram. Here we go. So we get some history on the Sith, which is pretty neat. Sith had not. Where is it? I know it's around here. Here, hold on. Yeah. His student's rough voice broke into his thoughts because Sidious is not really paying attention to him. Even says that he's disinterested in his apprentice. Lifted his eyes to the hologram. He stood facing the city, Sidious, his eyes directed at its lights, at the faint movement of its air traffic, disinterested in his apprentice Darth Maul, who waited to one side. But then it's talking as though Maul is the hologram. There's never a mention of there being a hologram until this moment. That's like, I mean, it's literally, top of this page is where we get that Darth Maul is next to him. So, okay, the person is there. Whole of this page is, well, it's a lot of it is the history of the Sith. A little bit more of that here. And then down here, then down here, so it's basically 2 pages later is when we get, oh, and there's a hologram here. So, but yeah, I will be talking about that. I just want to cover some other things first. So, one is, why does Tatooine not have a warning system for sandstorms besides old people bones? It's a very legitimate question because they have the technology to cross the galaxy. But it's the old woman going, oh, because of a cool breeze coming in, which it's also like, well, everyone's going to feel that. Oh, there's a storm coming, Annie. It's like, yeah. We should have this already figured out. I mean, I get the whole you want to depict Tatooine as being poor, which is actually not true. That's a very easy thing to argue. No, there's no way that's true. The Hutts wouldn't be there if it were poor. It's like their whole thing is greed, right? It's a criminal organization, the Hutts. They are involved in all kinds of crime, including slavery. And they're so poor that they're not going to set up a weather system that would help their own economy. So that, oh, we happen to know that a sandstorm's coming in. We can give everyone time enough to batten down so there's no damage. That's a benefit. You would do that. It's like there's no reason, unless the technology does not exist, there's no reason not to employ that technology. And how would the technology not exist when they can cross the galaxy? They have very advanced space travel technology. I say this is just rather weather radar kind of stuff, and satellites as well. You'd absolutely be able to monitor this. But it's like, nah, we're not going to do that. I should grant that certain aspects of what I'm talking about here are things I do think about and do look into historically, or just I see other things talking about them, and I learn from that. So I try to make sure that my worlds are, they make sense with regards to that. So when I see it absent, I notice. But I do also wonder if some of it is kind of also the issue with Star Wars that a lot of the planets are basically monobiome. Like the forest moon of Endor, as in the whole of that moon is a forest. It's like, that's not how that works. Hoth is completely frozen. That's not how that works. Well, not quite like that. To be fair with Hoth, they might not know it. They wouldn't have known it at the time, because it's one of the things I remember. I can't remember the name of the mission, but the one that we shot by Pluto, it's one of those things it's hilarious, because they invented the concept of a dwarf planet, declared that Pluto was one, before that mission got there. Then it got there, and it got all this data, all this imagery, and they're looking at it, it's like, we thought that it was just a dead ball of ice. There's actual flows here. It's like Pluto's an active world. Damn it, we shouldn't have named it a dwarf planet. I can understand some of the stuff where it's like, it should be considered like a binary planet system because it and Charon orbit each other. I'm trying, here, hang on. Just to explain this. Like, the Earth is so large compared to the moon that the center of gravity for the system is within the Earth. Pluto and Charon are so near each other in size that the center of gravity is actually between them. So on that it makes sense, but that's a binary planet system, not necessarily a dwarf planet. I haven't gotten to it yet, but in the book I am currently writing, I do kind of stick it to some of the stuff where it seems I do plan on sticking to some of this stuff in science, where it's like, we're going to come up with a term here to answer this question, to answer this problem. But if you actually stop thinking about it, it's like, yeah, but no one cares. Like, the answer doesn't give us anything. Why are you bothering with the question, even? Because there are examples like that in science. Because, I mean, there's one in particular I'm going to love putting into the book, because, like, this is the dumbest thing. People will beat you over the head saying, no, this is bad. It's like, there isn't a good defense for it, though. It is just so stupidly arbitrary. I was like, part of the argument that I don't want to get into it too much in detail, but basically there are certain things in science that are, by definition, arbitrary. But it can be this arbitrary or this arbitrary. And it's like, the one that they're like, oh, we should use this one. It's like, that's this arbitrary? It makes no sense. There's no real explanation. At least this arbitrary, there is reasoning there. But it's like, no, we shouldn't use that. We should only use this. It's like, this one makes more sense. Anyhow. Yeah, so the whole, that and aside with the whole dwarf planet thing, but coming back to Tatooine, it's like, it is going to be, especially if it is a living world, it's going to be not just a single biome, but it does also just seem, as I said, a symptom of that thinking with these worlds, that they're basically homogenous, that therefore it can also make sense that you could have basically an entire planet that's poor. You have the ability to move people en masse. If an entire planet is poor, it's going to have a small population because you'd put the population somewhere else. Either they would move on their own or you would move them. I mean, think about it. There's slaves there. Tatooine is poor when it comes to resources, to the best of our knowledge. There's no reason to be there. So why are the Hutts not like, well, we're going to find a planet like Naboo that isn't inhabited, take all the slaves up, put them there, and move them over, put them on that planet, because they'll produce more. This is obvious. Especially because there should still be uninhabited worlds, and even if not, it still is I'll get to it actually, because there's a problem with this, but you might find another world where it's like fertile like Naboo, not part of the Republic, so they don't have anti-slavery laws, or you just do it under the table. Sadly, that is, I think, very real. Very real in this situation, that you would have such slavery that it would just be, yeah, it's illegal, but I mean, if you just hide it, then yeah, it's sad, but is very realistic. But it's like, they could just do that and make so much more money. I mean, it's anyhow. Oh, actually, the next point is what the one I was mentioning, teasing there. So, Padme brings up about the whole the anti-slavery laws for the Republic and Shmi is like, the Republic is too far away. Like, no, the Republic doesn't exist here. We're too far away. But it's like, wait a minute. It had also been mentioned earlier that Naboo is very far from the Republic, which is part of the reason why it was, I think it was Qui-Gon reflecting on this. Why would you blockade Naboo? It's so far away, it's almost meaningless. To blockade it, it's like, yeah, and it's also, they apparently had to get from Naboo to Tatooine on sublight. So again, it should be very near Naboo. So it's like, it's odd, this idea that, oh, it's because we're really far away that we don't have it. It's like, you got a neighbor that's part of the Republic. You're clearly not that far away. Okay. That's a mistake I could see myself making, in that it's a continuity problem. It's there, but it's possible to miss that when you're doing it alone. This is freaking Star Wars. As I've said before, there would have been the potential for multiple editors would make sense, but it's also, at this point, there would be multiple fan-written Bibles even concerning everything here. But it's also, Lucas would have, built out a lot too. I mean, it's just, it feels like, yeah, you're just supposed to forget that, no, the geography doesn't actually lay out that way. And also, I did make a note here that there's also the possibility of the Republic just being like, you know what? We're ending slavery in the galaxy. You mean in every planet that the Republic is... No. We mean we're going to war. Every world that has slavery, we're going to conquer it and get rid of the slavery. Or we'll just threaten to conquer them unless they give up their slavery. There's actually been wars that is kind of how it went, where it was waged because one culture felt the other was doing things that were wrong. And it wasn't necessarily about, I mean, in some cases, yes, it was about completely destroying that culture because it was considered so corrupt and evil that it must be destroyed. But you could potentially have also been like, yeah, well, no, we're just stopping you from doing this. So, I mean, it is just one of those things where it's like, you could have done that. But they haven't. Which I guess may just go along with the whole, the Republic isn't actually that effective. I mean, at this point, at the point of the Phantom Menace, yes, the Republic is supposed to be useless. But in prior days, maybe. Okay, it mentions the whole thing about... Qui-Gon now says, when Anakin is talking about being a pod racer, that he's the only human, and Qui-Gon says it takes Jedi reflexes for that. And it's like, it got me thinking, why aren't there Jedi that have done pod races before that were human? So Anakin is not so unique. And it's not unreasonable. There would be Jedi who would be natural pilots. And so why wouldn't they then have those Jedi reflexes such that they could then use them to be in pod races? And not necessarily for the fame or the money, although some might do for that, but for the challenge even. And I could even see that being used as a way to try to reduce pod racing or start to influence it so that it is safer. Because, I mean, think about it. If you had a group of Jedi pilots that said, we're going to try to regulate this, we're going to try to make changes here. If they got in there and started winning, then they could potentially, have such a following. It would take a while, but have such a following being so dominant that they could start legitimizing it. And I don't think that would be inappropriate within the Jedi Order, at least conceptually, as far as, well, we are trying to help worlds, help people. So. Oh, yeah, one thing. When asking about, there's the question, is there anyone, because Shmi is like, no, I don't want Anakin racing. Qui-Gon's like, hey, I get it. I'm not going to force this then. Don't worry. Is there anyone else that's friendly towards the Republic? And this is Shmi then going like, no, Anakin has to help you. He's maybe meant to help you even. And it's like, okay, but there's nothing about, well, there is this retired pilot that we ran into the other day. I mean, the retired Republic pilot? I'm sorry. Part of the reason why I have to bring that up is that's back in chapter 2, and I know I mentioned there really seems no point to this character, or at least for how he is talking with Anakin, rather talking up Anakin and his skills as well. There seems to be no reason for that, but to continue to build him up. It's like, we already did that in chapter 1. We don't need this in chapter 2. Him just talking about being a pilot, sharing the stories, but treating the 3 kids as equals, not as equal among themselves, not elevating Anakin, would have been perfectly fine. But no, we're elevating Anakin, and now this character vanishes. And right now, we have a point where it's like, well, there's this one guy. Nope. So yeah, I don't like that, because like that character should have been changed or shouldn't have been there. So we get some history on the Sith, and I have a typo here. And it is somewhat interesting. So basically it says 2,000 years ago, you had the Jedi Order, and there was a rogue Jedi in here. Let me actually, it is like right where I put the quote mark. Okay. They were a cult given over to the dark side of the Force, embracing fully the concept that power denied was power wasted. And a rogue Jedi Knight had founded the Sith, a singular dissident in an order of harmonious followers, a rebel who understood from the beginning that the real power of the Force lay not in the light but in the dark. It's actually kind of funny that it's a singular dissident, but then he was alone at first, but others from the Jedi Order who believed as he did and who had followed him in his study of the dark side soon came over. He's not a single dissident then. That's multiple. Okay, I mean, it's, that is in fact how that works. But then it goes on that basically, yeah, they left, started a war with the Jedi, but there's also war with themselves, such that it was, here it is. In a matter of only weeks, all of them were dead. All of them died, all but one. And this is Darth Bane, who instituted the rule of 2, for those of you that may or may not be aware of that, which is basically why it's always master and apprentice. That is for 2 reasons. One, I think, is elucidated in the expanded universe. But for this, it was basically, yeah, that way there's no infighting. so they're not at war with each other, they're just going to be patient. But there's also the idea that the apprentice remains the apprentice until he is strong enough to kill the master, at which point, well, the master should be killed because he's no longer strong enough. So apprentice kills the master, takes a new apprentice then. And it's just jockeying back and forth like that. Also, if the apprentice tries and fails, then the master just gets a new apprentice, which is actually really risky. Because what happens if they kill each other? Or what happens, like if Vader... Because Palpatine is described as old in Return of the Jedi and near his natural death. What happens if Vader tries to kill Palpatine and fails? Like in the throne room scene, imagine that. Vader fails to kill Palpatine, dies himself. So now Palpatine needs a new apprentice, of which there's only Luke, who has already rejected him at this point, and Leia, who Palpatine doesn't actually know about. It's like Vader knows. Vader gets that, but Palpatine might not have heard that conversation. Or might not be able to find her, and it's also, he had literally also given the order already, yeah, blow up the moon. Once you can, blow that up. So it's like, if he succeeded, and Vader dies, he has no apprentice, and he potentially has no time to get a new one. So, I mean, it's just one of those, the rule of 2 is kind of not that smart. But the main thing that I have here is a note about this history, and it is one of those things where it's, I get the idea, and this is a thing for me that can be a problem, where it's like, if I had this idea in a note, I would keep thinking on it, and I'd realize, wait a minute, this doesn't work. Or I need to explore it a lot more. Which is that, okay, the guy decides to leave the Jedi, and they can't persuade him not to. Need to not embrace the dark side. Here's the thing, though. This dude's an idiot. Here's why. The Jedi, when the Order initially formed, we already have this from prior chapters. When it initially formed, it didn't know about the Force. It discovered that just as they were progressing normally, and then did their best to understand it. Which would mean then that by the nature of that study, they should have already encountered the dark side. Okay? And they chose to reject it. So this dude, by accepting it, is deciding to accept something that has already been defeated. Because if it were better, if it were greater, then it would have been accepted by the Jedi. But that's not what happened. They rejected it, which would mean it is in some way inferior. So the dude went to a defeated inferior form of the Force, thinking that would make him better. Dude's an idiot. He really is. And everyone following him, I mean, it's like, that is kind of a funny point. I mean, until the Bane thing, because of the constant training then to constantly improve. It's like, there's that, yeah, but that's different. In theory, you could also have a rule of 2 kind of set up for the Jedi. That would make them very powerful then. It's like, that's the rule of 2 thing. That's not Sith. That's not Darkseid. So yeah, it's like, this is actually really dumb. I'm just trying to think, because I'm certain that there are proven examples of that in real history, where it's like, yeah, we don't do that because it's inferior. That's why we're not using it anymore. Why are you going to it as though that is the answer? Yeah. Okay. So we also have that Maul, and this should be able to wrap up, though it may also trigger a rant, because it is kind of a ranty thing. Maul is now aware that they are on Tatooine. Tatooine is sparsely populated. His student's rough voice broke into his thoughts, and Darth Sidious lifted his eyes to the hologram. The Hutts rule. The Republic has no presence. If the trace was correct, Master, I will find them quickly and without hindrance. I actually went ahead multiple chapters, skimming through, because basically all I needed to see was anything concerning Sidious, anything concerning the ship. But I'm like, I skimmed all the way to them, and still is possible I missed something. I skimmed all the way to they have returned to the ship after the pod race, and there's no mention of a reply. So it's like they received a message, but that you can't trace somebody receiving a message. You trace somebody sending one, because you just broadcast out in all directions. So it's like, what? How has Maul found them? At least I did also see in there, because after Qui-Gon and Maul fight, there is the mention. It's like, he'll find us again. Now, how do you know? And it's like, well, I mean, obviously we're going to Coruscant. He's not. If he's after us, he knows that's where we're going to go. But, I mean, it still is just this whole, from what I saw, was no explanation for how they found. Maybe it's just later, or maybe I missed it, because I'm literally just skimming to see, like, Obi-Wan being mentioned kind of thing, because he would be there, or Panaka, or the Queen. Seeing any of those mentions, there, nothing. Okay, now I see something. Skim, nothing for explanation. As I get, we had the setup that, it's if they reply, then that means that they will be exposed. But Obi-Wan told them not to. Qui-Gon said, yes, you were right not to tell them that. And yet it still is, apparently somebody did it. It's like, you set up and then double down on, they should not do so, and we're told not to. And now it's like, oh yeah, somebody did. And we're not going to get an explanation for that? Yeah. His gaze shifted. This is the end of chapter 9. His gaze shifted to Obi-Wan. I think he's referring to... Oh, no, her gaze. Sorry, I was missing the art, because I'm trying to read it quickly. The Jedi shook his head quickly. It is a trick. Send no reply, Your Highness. Send no transmission of any kind. Yeah, the Queen stared at him uncertainly for a moment, then nodded in acquiescence. Obi-Wan left her chambers without further comment, hoping fervently he had made the right decision. He did. I mean, it's also kind of obvious. Yeah, so it's like, between receiving a message to home and that, in theory it is very, very quick, such that they would not have had time enough to reply before he told them not to. So, who replied? And this is also the end of chapter 9, and Maul has already gotten a trace in chapter 10. So, they've already been told not to. and like within hours somebody does. It's kind of like Qui-Gon announcing to everyone, hey, we're in a Nubian. We're in this J-Type 365, whatever the heck it was. We're in this Nubian. I mean, it's like that. It's like, why are these people being stupid? It's like, Qui-Gon has reason not to do this, and he does it. Obi-Wan tells them not to do it, and somebody apparently does, and we're not getting an answer as to who or why. Because there could be some context there. Like if somebody, like when the handmaid, let's just say, was stupid and decided to just like send a transmission, try and find out, like, what if one of them is the daughter of a different governor, and like, or just one of the other officials who in theory is being hurt, or just trying to find out something about somebody back home. That's not unreasonable that's what happened. It's still, they're stupid, but it's like you can kind of understand them doing that, but we need that explanation. Not getting the explanation is like, yeah, I'm just saying that Maul can find them now. It's like, dude, we need reason here. It's feeling like Empire Strikes Back again. It's a thread, a flimsy, fragile thread. That's what it feels like. It'll be interesting when getting to the other books. And one thing I'll add that I am thinking about with this, concerning it being a flimsy, fragile thread. These novelizations might be of a different character, underlying purpose, than the original trilogy novelization. In that the original trilogy, certainly New Hope, was basically written because that's what you would do at that time. And Empire Strikes Back and Return of the Jedi also to some degree. But I can believe that they were not purely it was part of the whole, yes, you would do novelizations for a movie. It wasn't purely just to serve the movie. This probably was very much to serve the movie, and not so much just because, yes, we do novelizations of movies. So I could see it being, unfortunately, that all three of these books, I don't know, we will find out. All three of the books are not meant to be books on their own. They're meant to be merchandising from the movies. We shall see. Because it is possible we may get something like Return of the Jedi, which was just quite a different experience, though it's the same story as the movie, but told very differently, and for some of it, a hell of a lot better. Yeah, I mean, so it will be interesting to see if maybe one of these authors may have decided, yeah, look, I get it's for the movie, and thank you for giving me all this and giving me permission to do this, but I'm going to tell a good story here too. I mean, it's like, I'm following your notes, don't worry. But it's like, I'm gonna make sure this is good. And right now, I'm not feeling that with the Phantom Menace, which is disappointing, but you know, is what it is. Is what it is. And to be fair, I can't say any of my books are good. I think the ones I recommend I think are good. But I can't otherwise say that my books are good, and people don't read them, so they can't tell me they're bad. One advantage to being anonymous, you don't know. Although true, when I go through, read, and do all this stuff with them, I will probably say, oh yeah, this was dumb, why did I do that? Why am I dumb? We might have those moments. I just don't know when that'll be. All right, see you next time.